host on The Real Deal with my special featured guest today from Scotland, George Lees, talking about the royal families of Europe and the wars they have engendered to promote their own power and dynasties. George, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to get the truth out about what religion actually represents. So many of the world's banking families are popes, and that will be no surprise to you because you understand the Committee of 300 and the clubs of 1001. All of them are on the take from all of their nations, and that's 12 of the British royals. They are actually the bloodlines that are Gibheline, and those are the things that you and Greg Hallett used to talk about, because that is the Hanoverian monarchies that was blind Prince George of Cumbria and Teviotdale, but they're the Hanoverian dynasty that were the secret lovers of Queen Victoria. Can you remember all of that stuff about Queen Victoria's only legitimate baby being sired by the Hanoverian kings on the quiet, and they were then raised on the Isle of Wight? And that is the Peter Sellers movies, and all of it that Greg released is absolutely stunning. None of his videos are left on the internet this side of the Atlantic. It's all just now buffoonery and the attempts to, depict Jesus Christ living in caves and things. There's nothing on any of the 6 videos that you and Jim and Red Ice Radio made on the European monarchies and the inbreeding with the Rothschild family, which I was hoping to talk about in the second half of the video, because that is the Greg Hallett stuff is still, I've got it all on my web pages, but because the Rothschilds are now selling the books, and the ones that are the most sensitive are now out of print, and you can only there's only one copy in England, and that's in the National Library in London at the other end of the country. So let me tell you about universities and their role in the mafia globally. Did you notice that Donald Trump has been confirmed to be in one of the 5 mafia families in New York?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, so he's, I think it's is it Columbia? There's the jokes are about Columbo. Yeah, and that is one of the mafia families, I think.
Gambino?
Yeah, that's one of them. And Donald's more or less confirmed that he's in it. In the movie about the mafia, the families that come in and nail the man's hand to the bar, they are the same as the Archbishop of Glasgow. That's
You're talking about the Godfather movie.
Yeah, so when they go in,
Godfather 1. Yeah.
I forget the name of the big hitman that they send to talk to 2 of the other families, but they with lighting his cigarette, they nail his hand to the bar top, and then they strangle him with a piece of wire from the back, and his name is Tartaglio, and that is the Archbishop of Glasgow. It's absolutely...
That's a very old movie, though, George. That's like 1965.
Well, Tartaglio's still in office as the Bishop of Glasgow, and I made a movie on him in full. You should see his facial structure. He looks as he's been beaten up by the hitmen in the family. But yeah, the stuff that I've learned about So have you heard of the Hohenzollerns and the Guelph and Gibheline families?
I have, George, but I wondered whether you wanted to work backwards from the Jeffrey Epstein scandal.
Oh, that story's more or less told. And if you've heard about Maxwell's kids, can you remember Maxwell was in charge of the Oxford University Press?
Ghislaine Maxwell, she was a procurer for Jeffrey Epstein.
But do you understand? I've published a couple of videos this week on Weinstein. So Weinstein, and I've gotten 500 hits in the first couple of days, because Weinstein is actually a mind control professor at Columbia University. And that is the alleged rape of Gwyneth Paltrow. She's in the mafia, she's a Kabbalist, and so is her husband, Chris Martin. He, as we've talked about already, descends directly from Arius Piso in the most lethal bloodline in the world, and that is the launch of all of the divide and conquer religious problems that the world's ever had. But the political thing that is the emperors that are the Hohenlohes and the Hohenzollerns and Frederick the Great, that is the European nobility, and those are the black families that are the blight of the world, and all of it, they're fighting against their cousins in every one of the global wars. So that's the Gibhelines, who are the emperors of the Hohenzollern territory, and that is right on the Austrian and Polish borders. And the other ones are the German families that are the Gibhelines, and that is the Gibhelines are the Hohenlohes, and the Guelphs are the papal families. It's absolutely obscene. The reason that people become popes and go on crusades is just to kill the pagans and to take over their land. And all of that has been done for thousands of years, and that ends up in Hollywood as the Baldwins and the Conradians of the Holy Lands. That's Conrad Black, and you remember him in the jail for a while as a journalist. But the Baldwins are the actual actors that are in Hollywood, and when Donald was elected, they were giving him advice within 2 or 3 days on the internet. So that is the German families that are the families that were, they have become banking dynasties, and some of the names you will immediately recognize. Orsini Rosenburg, they are an Italian papal line, and that is the families that are in the Mozart movie. When they go to visit Frederick the Great and Mozart wants to play concerts for him, the Orsinis and the Rosenbergs are in the audience talking to Frederick the Great, but they are one of the biggest banking dynasties in world history. Have you seen the Mozart movie?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And Rothschilds are on it, and Geithner is all the way through the story. And the families, who's the one that goes into Bohemian Grove on the quiet and then makes videos?
Alex Jones.
So he's just a double agent. He's actually in the mafias, and so is the one that is on the Federal Reserve. That is, I just mentioned his name. He's Geithner.
Yes.
And do you understand? Have you heard of a man called? He's agent for Rothschild and founder of the Federal Reserve in America, and his name is Mandel House. Have you heard of him?
Colonel House.
Yes.
He's an aide to FDR.
So he's a founder of the Federal Reserve, the third one that they tried to launch right in the middle of World War I, with Woodrow Wilson in charge. And that is the one where they had only 3.
Colonel House, yeah, Woodrow Wilson. He was aide to Woodrow Wilson, yes.
That's right. But he's actually a Rothschild agent, like many of the other ones, like, what was the one who came across from Hanover? Jacob Schiff. And there was actually a Rothschild on the boards. But it's the same in Britain. Hannah Mary spouts on about her favourite politician being Mandelson. He's the cover for Mandel House. And that is Mandelson, who's on the Committee of 300 with 12 of the British royals. And all of them are absolute billionaires. The Queen of England earns 50 million a year without having to do a day's work. And her every time that she gets a pay rise, every year, the salary goes up by 25%. None of the public sector workers in Great Britain have had a pay rise for 10 years now. It's absolutely ruthless. And she is in the conspiracy. Have you seen the Jumanji film? Robin Williams?
What is the title?
Jumanji.
You know, I don't think I have seen that. Tell me about. What is it about?
It's about Robin Williams being they're in a small town in America, and he's been lost in the jungle for 30 years, and he emerges from it, and they're playing a board game that means that they end up in different scenes, and sometimes they end up with rhinos charging at them. But the name of the family that he plays the leader of and the young boy of in that movie is Parish. Have you heard of Farish?
No, keep going.
So this is a massive conspiracy. This is the treason of the Queen of England. Farish is an agent for her Windsor dynasty, and that is the launch of, every time she goes to America, she goes to see Stamps Farish, and there are 3 generations of that family, and that is them parodying the Jumanji movie. The reason it's called Jumanji is that William the Conqueror, who was nicknamed the Undertaker because he was such a lethal leader, he would not let Anglo-Saxon boys live beyond the age of 8. They had to be executed before then in case they sired revolutionary kids. And that is why William the Conqueror's nickname was the Undertaker.
They were siring kids at the age of 8?
No, they were executing them, hanging them, beheading them, so that they could not sire Anglo-Saxon babies as another menace to the regime. Wow. It's absolutely ruthless. And the reason that the Jumanji film is called that is because William the Conqueror lived on the Normandy coast. And I think I've told you this before, but his residence was called Jumanji's, and his archbishops lived in the Jumanji's Abbey in Normandy. And that, if you remember, that is the massive pistic that is, what was the cartoon thing that was set up on something island? It was the Thunderbirds. Can you remember that? Are you? It was
go right ahead.
So that is Falaise Castle on the Normandy Peninsula that was home to William the Conqueror, and Fala is the home of the Piso family in Italy, and the dog that sat on Roosevelt's lap was called Fala. And all of that is the home for the New World Order as they transit out of Rome and make their way to Naples in Florida, like we've told you before. And it's just absolutely amazing how those families have survived through that period. But they've not just survived, they've become the imperators of your American nation. And I've told you in recent interviews that Donald Trump is the 5th cousin of Billy Bradford on the Mayflower, and he's the 5th cousin of George W. Bush because of Mrs. Simpson's sex life. It's absolutely astounding. And all of my leads, almost all of them, came from Greg. I miss his insight like crazy. And that's why I'm quite determined to find out what's in that book that is How to Take Over the World, A Right Royal Con. So Queenie is a conspirator during the interwar period with those families that are Stamps Farish. And all of it is the cover of the actors that are in the Jumanji film. And the Thunderbirds was about Tracy Island, and that is the launch of all the spaceships and things in what was just cartoon form. But when you look at the faces of the actors and the Muppets in it, they are the Bush family and all the aristos in North America. But you've never heard of that one. I think I've told you about Falaise Castle, and that is on the Normandy coast. And it's absolutely stunning how these banking dynasties. Do you understand what Donald Tusk is? He's a European, they're all whinging about the EU, but all of them are billionaires, yet at the expense of their electorates. That is Donald Tusk. He's the Count of Tusculum, and that is on the Polish coast in the Baltic region. And all of it is just a massive steal from the people. Have you heard of Tusk?
Yeah, sure, of course. He has the rocket and all that. He wants to have missions to the Mars.
Yeah, well, that's all just a piss take. They are on the take from the European electorates, and it's the same for almost everybody that is on that committee of 300. Tony Blair, all the people that you would never have reckoned would have become Catholics, but he and all of the folk that like Bush Senior and Junior, all of them are Charlemagne Prize winners, and that is because they're serial killers. And it was Greg that opened up the whole of the rationale behind the Iraq wars and the taking over of all of the oil wealth. The Bushes are legendary for launching into Skull and Bones, and the universities are horribly important in the whole of that evil story. So the oldest universities in the world are in Venice, and that's why Indiana Jones went there. Yeah, everywhere he goes, it's a massive piss take about where the wealth and the mafia families for the world have been. So that is the oldest universities are in Padua, which is Venice, and the oldest of the lot is linked in a lifelong, centuries old, well, millennia old link to Cambridge University and the Corpus Christi colleges in Cambridge. And I've told you before that they and Oxford and Göttingen and Heidelberg were immune from bombing in World War II, because that is where the chancellors and the prime ministers were educated. And all of those people that are educated at Cambridge and Oxford, they become the Monty Python's team, and they're able to giggle their way through their life as billionaires. Yeah, and all of it is the false religion that is the life of Brian and the B-Aryan stories. So my wife, from Hertfordshire in England, where the Rothschilds have their main hub, that is another banking dynasty in her hometown of Hemel Hempstead, and I've only just discovered it in the last 2 days. That is the family called Brakespeare. Have you heard of that one?
Brakespeare, I don't think I have, George.
So they're a financial dynasty clashing with the popes and the Hohenzollerns. And the Hohenzollerns, that is the families that were Hohenlohe and Stauffen, You remember, what is the actor that was in the Valkyrie movie? Tom Cruise. He's a Kabbalist, he's a Satanist. All of them are actually, they're actually banking dynasties, and that is, his role is Stauffenberg. He's the one that was alleged to have tried to assassinate Hitler in the middle of the war, and his woman has a red gear on when they part for good just before he gets shot dead in the lineup, but none of that will be true. That's the Stauffen families that Tom Cruise is likely to be in, and he's like a mafia member, and all of them are Kabbalists. Gwyneth Paltrow, Madonna, yeah, they're all worshipping Satan, and that is the black nobility for at least 2,000, nearer 3,000 years. What they've done is to go all around the world, and that is the joke that a few years ago they put a sixth circle on the Olympian flags, and that was the 5 continents, but now it includes Antarctica. And all of it is a steal for the world's oil. And Greg was the most explicit person to explain what Tony Blair did and how there were loads of body doubles for the New World Order in the execution of the people that are still actually working in the Anglo-American syndicates. That is, what was the name of the executed man in, Gaddafi was he Jordan? Libya, yeah, and what Hussein, Greg explained to the whole world how that, and I think you were one of his listeners with Red Ice Radio, how the whole of that was faked up, and he had 10 doppelgangers, and they are now participating in the. I met him in Edinburgh with his family and had dinner with them. It's absolutely astounding.
One of the Saddam doubles you had dinner with?
Yeah. His wife and his daughter were with me. And it's the same that...
Was he a good double?
Yes, absolutely. But it's now becoming buffoonish. Have you heard of the concept of there being Star Wars? Yet since Carrie Fisher passed on, she was in the Star Wars movie with Harrison Ford. And now, the whole of my life, I'm surrounded by actors just taking the piss out of that concept. And I don't know why they do it, but it's massive. Every time you go out and you talk to people, it's just obvious who they are in that acting team. And that is Arnie Schwarzenegger and the concept of the Force being with you. He's a mate of Lord Jacob Rothschild's, and that is the complete disappearance. Have you seen Sundance and what was the other outlaw?
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance.
Yeah, so La Force is the man with the white sheriff's hat on that followed them, and he is a mafia family in Italy too. La Force is like Tusculum. They are one of the mafia families that are tied into the papacy, and that is the lethal papacy, and that is the jokes that I've told you. Martin McGuinness was an Irish terrorist, and his middle name was Pacelli. That is a papal bloodline. It's absolutely unbelievable that they can do that in this day and age, but when you remember that Lord Condon of the Met Police scammed the London Olympics with the other Kabbalists that are David Beckham and Nick Clegg, who's a British politician, used to be a Lib Dem. All of them made fortunes from the London Olympics, and it was just a massive joke at the British and Australasian war dead. Queenie came in on a parachute with one of the Doctor Who cast, I forget what his name was, but all of it is totally shameful, because Mr. Bean, that opened the ceremony in the newly built stadium, was the war correspondent for Gallipoli. And that's the same joke as they're now pushing out. When Boris ran for Prime Minister, the man that they chose as the governor for Iraq, he's called Rory Stewart, and he's an absolute geek. And his family are the launch of the Orange Revolution and, the splitting up of the United Kingdom. The uniting of the United Kingdom into the Muppet Show that we now have. But I was going to tell you about Cambridge and its links to the oldest universities in the world. I think your oldest one will be Harvard. And I've told you before that the boss that had to resign there was Drew Faust. She's a woman, and that is the Fausts and Faustinas that were married to Marcus Aurelius. I've got all the family trees, and it's much more interesting than working in one of those ancient unis. But so Bologna's the oldest, and Cambridge is tied into Venice with a massive treaty that is, I think it's about 3,000 years old. It's absolutely astounding. And they get Black Death in 1348. And that is the families that were in Campania, which is home to Piso, and that is the region where they have Vesuvius, and there's another sulfuric volcano on the north side of the bay, and all of that is the explosions that happened when the Piso families launched the Bible. And all of the things that we've now discovered, a mate of mine called Sean Maguire was very helpful in the dissecting of what the papal bloodline has been. All of it was the fake authors of the Bible, the Quran, the Talmud, and all of those books or texts were written on papyri, and that is the name of the house under Vesuvius, was the Villa Papyri. So the Lombards are from the northern part, that's the Alpine bits, that are also home to Rockefeller and Trump Heller, and all of the stories that I've told you about Donald and his plans to steal the world as the cousin of Henry VIII and all the British aristocrats. Have you seen the Great Escape movie with Steve McQueen?
Yeah, but you're talking about ancient history, my friend.
So do you know what his name was in the movie and who that is?
I don't recall.
His name was Schultz, and Schultz is one of the people that came across in Operation Paperclip with the von Braun that was commissioned to take man to the moon as a rocket scientist. They were continuing with their eugenics and rocket science research so that they could launch the bombs on Hiroshima. And all of that is done by the families that were the Austrian nobility. She's Margaret Hodge now, but that is the Oppenheimer families, and they and the other nuclear scientists that launched the bomb, Rutherford, they are all Nobel Prize winners. And this week, they're so panicky about my revelations that they're now proclaiming that it would be nice if we could have a nuclear-free world. It's all just a massive turn that they are reported the trading of a company that was run by a warmonger in Africa, and he was selling the shares and leading the board at Trident 3 and Trident 4. They were registered in Eccleston Square in London, and that is Bernie Eccleston, that is a racing man, and that is the residence of the Duke of Westminster, who is Britain's richest man. The whole of it is just a massive, tell them lies, keep them scared, and we're able to take over the throne forever. But the family that is Brakespeare is alleged to be even more powerful than Rothschild. And I've never heard of them until this week. But now that I've done the research on them, it's absolutely stunning. And loads of them are just in those hometowns in Rothschild's Hertfordshire, where I used to live and where all my kids were reared. And that is where the Rothschilds run the show. And that's why I'm keen to talk about Greg Hallett at every opportunity I can. Let me just show you what the titles were for his chapters in the book. So do you understand what I said about Farah SH? So the Queen of England gets to go and visit him, and they are trading with the enemy. They are related to the Tyson families and the Bornemissa families that are the richest in the world. That is, Bornemissa are quite close to you in Alsace. That is Austro-Hungary, and they are one of the biggest bloodlines, and that is the Ottoman Empire and the launch of the Holy Roman German Wars, and that is the Austrians and the Hohenlohes again. But oh, sorry, it's on my other computer. So Tusculum, Orsini Rosenburg, and the oldest unis, and the oldest uni in Britain that is Cambridge is on the corner of Trumpington Street. Yeah, Donald has not been picked accidentally. All of it has been planned for hundreds of years. And I've told you before that he is part of the Dutch naval presence. They were 2 generations of them were called Tromp. And that is the Dutch East India Company that were ravaging the whole of Eastern Europe and Asia. And that is the massive earthquake-prone places in the South Pacific that are, I forget what the volcano was, but it was fabulous in the movies when I was just a teenager. Java, was it? That was where the volcanoes erupted and the East India Company were trying to trade all around them. Something east of Java.
I think that's right.
Yeah. So do you understand the stories about the sex island and all the troubles that led to the suiciding of its owner Epstein? It's actually another Rothschild scam. Peter Mandelson, who's Hannah Mary Rothschild's favourite politician, because he's an agent for them on the Committee of 300, he was alleged to be the lover of the footballer that is Ronaldo, and they went to Epstein's sex island, and that is why it became notorious. And then Prince Andrew went with a buxom blonde, and all of it is the cover for the footballers and the gay boy that is Mandelson, who's on the Committee of 300 as a billionaire, and that is why he is her favourite politician. And that then leads to the owner of that island's pretended suicide. He now drives the grocery vans that are frozen that come into the hotel that I'm now living in. It's absolutely pathetic. And Trump, I always thought that he might be like a simpleton and he might be able to change the world because he doesn't look too ambitious. But the whole lot of it is a terrible mafia setup. Have you heard that the French guy that came to visit him, every time they get visitors, they plant a new oak tree to commemorate the death of every pagan Indian in America? Yeah, it's absolutely ruthless. And I've told you those stories about Frankfurt. Same there, that is Thor's oak in that nation. And Macron visited them. They launched a new oak tree And that is what happened when the Pope went to Ireland to meet Higgins. He's the president in Ireland, but he's one of the first 10 Piso popes on the bloodline. And Pliny the Elder, Pliny the Younger are on that bloodline, the first 10. And on the next 20, you do not get the news of the next 20 until you have to pay for the new PDFs that the academics release. It's totally pathetic. Everything is commercialized, and it's. Let me just have a look. So the Weinstein thing is the mind control center. I've published a video on my YouTube channel just a couple of days ago. You can find it there, and that is the massive piss take that they're pretending that the actresses have been raped by that man, but he's just a mind control center expert from Colombia that is one of the 3 corners of the pyramid for Egypt. Yeah, and Egypt's boss is Mubarak, and that is the maiden name of Shakira, the singer, who's married to a Piquet in Formula One. It's I've got everything sussed out now, and the Persia thing is absolutely fascinating. So Persia, I forget what is that called now? Iran. I think it's Iran.
Yeah, sure, of course.
So the Persian dynasties were one of the biggest of the lot. And they are also the Cyrus dynasties, and that is the launch of Miley Cyrus. All of them will be kings and queens of those ancient empires and nations. And when you look up Perseus in the massive books that are on those dynasties, you get 4,000 hits, and that is the owners and the of the Bush family title that was Barbara Pierce, and that is Percy Ivanic and Perseus the poet, and all of them are out of those massive mansions, and all of it parodies the Jason and the Argonauts movies, because all of them are there temporarily to fleece the land, its wealth, and its ownership. And that's why the Pope Francis is the biggest landowner on this earth. And Benedict, he's a relative of Gwyneth Paltrow, and all of them are Kabbalists, and they worship Satan on the quiet. And the ones that were, what was that?
What does worshiping Satan entail?
Well, that I believe is what the Cabal is, and they're occultists, and they worship Baphomet the goat. Yeah, all of it is to scare the people shitless and to take the attention off the fact that they're several billion times richer than anybody else, even in the aristocracy in Europe, even in the monarchy in Europe. The Queen is second to that Shakespeare, Brakespeare family, and that is she is one of the wealthiest in the world, and she is alleged to be the actual leader of the Committee of 300. If your people were to know that, well, I believe that everybody in America does know the world's biggest secrets, because they're from the elite families that were descended from the kings and queens all over Europe. So the name of Steve McQueen in the movie was it Schultz? Schultz. So he is he's the 5th cousin of Henry VIII in those ancient days, and that's why they celebrated. They made gin in the death camp, and they celebrated the 4th of July because Schultz was an American aristocratic family that descends from Henry VIII. It's all just the same stories, and the genealogical stuff is difficult for them to evade because it's When I saw that Epstein was the parent of that person that was Maxwell's daughter, from the bloodline tree you can immediately see what has happened there. And he was actually married to that Giselle Maxwell. So let me just read you the titles of Greg's. What else is on this? Oh, and in Rome, there are cultures that are over 9,000 years old. That is I've never heard of them until this week, but that is the Villanovan culture and the Villanovan. Have you heard of it?
I'm not sure I have.
They're way down south of Etrusca, below Rome, but they are 9,000 years old, and that is the earliest pagans before Christianity came in. And what else did I promise to show you? So Greg's stories are intertwined with, you remember Killing Kittens? Commoner Kate's place of work. So in the stories that I'm now reading from Greg's banned books that are out of print, there is a brothel in Berlin called, sorry, my computer's frozen temporarily. Oh, shit. Sorry, Jim.
That's all right.
So, the British sent people all across Europe to inbreed with the locals so that they could have double agents when they called for a war. And that is a man called Simon Fraser. And all of this is Greg's output. But if you've not got that book, you will not know it. So there are the pictures on my screen now of the Brakespeare residences in Hertfordshire, where my wife came from. And there below them are the massive fires that occurred in the BP plants in my wife's hometown of Hemel Hemsted, which is Paul McCartney's place of residence. And his woman, I can't remember, what was the one that broke her legs or got amputated? One of her legs. Yeah, that's right. So she's a Hemel Hempstead person too. And that is the BP oil plant. That's British Petroleum. And that is on the Gulf of Aden. That is where the oil wealth came from. Hemel Hempstead means God in heaven. Yeah, and that is where my wife used to stay. And that is where the Brakespeares have their parks. And they own BP and all of the massive industry that is rural Hertfordshire. And I thought it was all Rothschilds, but now I'm not so sure. It's absolutely amazing. And that is the launch of our Shakespearean man. And for years, Nadim Zahawi is a Kurdish member of the House of Commons. He's a war criminal, but he's indicted the people that were the war victims for war criminality. And he is now trading out of the House of Commons. He's the MP for Stratford-on-Avon, where Shakespeare lived. And all of the videos I've made on that sad bastard have now been removed by Rupert Murdoch from YouTube, and Rupert Murdoch's videos have now been removed, even though there's over 2,000 or 3,000 views, because Rupert picks the police. And the police get paid by a company called Clifford Chance, and all of it is a massive mafia op, and that is the Clifford Chance is a massive set of Italian dynasties. So that is the Piso Polis from Naples and Rome, yet running the massive lawless syndicate that scammed the London Olympics, that is Lord Condon and Lord Stevens of Kirkwelpington and the killing of Princess Diana, and all of it is a massive financial entity. None of them are interested in law enforcement, but they'd love to have me banged up and shut the fuck up, because they get harassed by me all of the time now. But they've sold off all of the houses for the policemen all across the borders, except in my hometown and in Galashiels. And the politicians will not appear in those towns because they know that I've got other director numbers. That's John Lamont in this town that I'm in. He's got 130 directorates with the people that partitioned the United Kingdom, and they are the Dukes of Queensberry and Buccleuch. And that is the third cousins of the Queen of England in Bowes Lyons Dalkeith. And it's a massive mafia up. And all of the families that were in the Parliament when Cromwell beheaded Charles I, that's Greg's output, and all of the people that were beheaded and the dynasties that were sired by Rothschild and all of the concubines that they provided. So Nell Gwyn, in the Rothschild stories that have now been taken out of print, she was given diuretics, and when she went to bed with Charles I, who eventually was beheaded in what is now our War Memorial Place, she pissed on him because they were giving them all drugs. And that is Greg has told the whole of that story. So there are the titles of his chapters in the book that I would kill to access. It's only got about 220 pages, but the first is the Catholic con, the Jewish con, the Anglican con, the Hanover cons, and royal eugenics. How Scotland lost its parliament, I've just explained that. That is in the Cromwell-led revolutions, and Cromwell was the first governor of the university at Cambridge that is tied into the oldest in Italy. Then it's the mad King Georges. That's George I, George II, George III. So the Germans took over in 1714. That's George I, and his real name was Ludwig. And that is the mad king that was George III in the Helen Mirren movie. And they had to dope him up with depressant drugs that made him manic. So they gave him cyanide, and those are the movies in Hollywood where they had to do the stool analysis to let the doctors make their psychiatric decisions. Yeah? So the next one is Missing Time. And I remember Greg talking to you about the Gregorian calendar and the massive battles in Russia and places like that, that the troops did not show up in time because of the time shift between the nations. But I've not got the wits to really dissect that bit properly. Did you understand that when he was telling you it? It was time is not time and place is not a place. It was all far too philosophical for me to follow. But that's one of the titles, Missing Time, Calendar Changes. And it was all the shifts, Gregorian, and what was the one in South America? I can't mind what they had a special time sector too. So the next one is the Queen Victoria con, and that is all the Rothschild bastards. And the telling thing, the reason they've banned the book forever is that the pictures are so telling. That is Winston Churchill, all his relatives, all the British royals, and all of them were sent into, as the leadership team, the bedrooms to sire the Rothschild bastards. And that's why they call it the Queen Victoria cons and the Rothschild con. And the next chapter is 6, and that is syphilis, the royal pox. I've only got 2 pages of almost all of those chapters. So if I could get my hands on it, or get access to, there's a new thing called, where you can get software versions of what's in a book. It's Dingle or something. I think I told you about it when you were trying to find the books in your collection, but you haven't got this one. And then it's post-war social patterns, ecclesiological and etymological. Oh, that's the rationalization of the word fuck, which is, you remember what Greg told you it means? Royal brothels?
Yeah.
Can you remember? Fornication under consent of the king. You can see why Queenie does not want it published. That's another royal money stream. And Greg was a genius in the way that he delivered it. That Mello woman, she is now claiming that he's mental, and that she's now selling all his books with the spy master, and I believe that he's in one of those banking dynasties too. It's very, very difficult to tell the good people apart from the bad ones, and I think the good ones are outnumbered by millions.
George, I regret to say I have a pressing, unexpected commitment. Can we tie it together?
Yeah, I'll just give you the three other titles. Post-war social, oh, that's the fuck word. The Rothschild-Hitler family tree. That is quite absurd, but I've got now all the evidence for it being absolutely true, and all of the people that were sent into that are actually the Betty Grable families. That's Gelly Rabal, that was Hitler's lovers, and when the Bushes diasporaed into America, they used nicknames that are a massive piss take. And then you've got the last one is current counterintelligence and the spying scandals that mean no one can know whether or not the spy master is telling the truth or he's just repeating something that was discovered at the end of the last war. I'll stop there.
George, thank you so much for joining me on The Real Deal. I very much appreciate it. Thank you for your historical observations and other analysis.
Okay, Jim. Can you ask around? I would kill to get that book.
Yeah. George, let me get this back to you. I got to take care of something. I'm sorry this has come up.
Okay, cheers, Jim. Thanks for the chance.
Cheers.
Bye. Signing off. So there are the titles. Yeah, you get 2 or 3 pages. Let me show you that as one of my viewers now. Yeah, so there's the index, how Scotland lost its parliament. Let me show you the killing kittens equivalent in Berlin during the war. There's Charles I, beheaded right in front of what is Whitehall. That is where the poppy wreaths are laid every year. That is the video I made with Sean Maguire and John Patterson on the massive joke that is the United Kingdom and the state that it has now become. Yeah, there's the Archbishop of Canterbury. So this is the Catholic con, the Jewish con, the Anglican con, the Hanover con, and Royal Eugenics by Greg Hallett, who's no longer with us. Okay? The Catholic con, the weedy King Charles, this is Greg's writing, was King of England from 27th March 1625 until his beheading on the 30th of January 1649 outside Whitehall. He was an advocate of the divine right of kings, and many feared he was attempting to gain absolute power. He raised taxes without the consent of Parliament, appointed his friend William Laud as Archbishop of Canterbury, and went about imposing a Catholicised version of Protestantism on the Church of England. And here we've got page 2. That's all you get of the Catholic con the Jewish con, the Anglican con. Oh no, sorry, there's 2 other pages. The Archbishop of Canterbury introduced Catholic-style bishops and prayer books, rote learning in place of Bible study, lecturing by inaudible Scots. Yeah, apologies for that. An increasingly Catholicised Church of England was being used to serve a monarchical dictatorship. People once again feared the divine right of kings would mean eroded rights for the commoner, and a rebellion was afoot. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Church of England, then canonised one person, King Charles I. Right then, King Charles I had 9 legitimate children, and the high infant mortality rate and low male birth rate is indicative of syphilis. Syphilis can be passed on to children, congenital syphilis, and also showed up as madness. This madness was to plague the British monarchy through all of its lines: the Stuarts, the Hanovers, the Saxe-Coburg-Gothas, and the Windsors, such that the study of the British royals is a study of syphilis, madness. Sorry, there's a prostitute just appeared on my screen. Yeah. Second son, King Charles II, Catherine of Braganza with no legitimate issue. Third son, King James II, 14th October 1633 to 16th September 1701, married Lady Anne Hyde without issue. She died in 1671. He then married Mary of Modena with issue, children. Henry, Duke of Gloucester, 8th July 1640, 18th September 1660, died aged 20. Mary, Princess Royal, 4th November 1631 to 24th December 1660, married William II, Prince of Orange, and had issue. That's William and Mary and the takeover of the whole world, Donald Trump and the Dutch families that were admirals called Trump. 2 generations before the Trump family moved to America to be in the Yukon gold rush and to dodge the draft in America. Middle name Christ. Fred Christ Trump. Mary Princess Royal, 4th November 1631 to 24th December 1660. That will be Mary Queen of Scots. Married William II. Oh no, sorry, that's Mary of Orange. Elizabeth, 1635 to 1650, died aged 12. And Anne, that's Queen Anne, died aged 3. Catherine, oh no, sorry, it's not Queen Anne. Catherine died at birth. Henrietta Anne married 1661 to Philip, Duke of Orleans, and had issue. Yeah, and that is all of those deaths round about the same time as William of Orange launched the Bank of England and Rothschilds steal the whole show out of Frankfurt. Yeah, they are the banners of this book, yeah, which is why it's now being sold from St. James's Place with the false author almost unhinged, and that is now being proclaimed by the people that are profiting from his unhingement and them being allowed to sell the books. Miss de Mello, practicing witch, capable of murdering someone if she wants them murdered. She told me that personally before she unfriended me on Facebook. Lawrence de Mello. And there is Oliver Cromwell, yeah, that brutalised Ireland, that brutalised the false religious sides that were the Cavaliers and the Roundheads. Yeah, 25th April 1599 was a Member of Parliament 1628 to 29, who argued for a vote for all men, democracy, and his rules are still published on the parliamentary web pages. Yeah, and you can see those web pages and their location in the video I made with John Patterson and Sean Maguire. The Scottish rebelled in the Bishops' War, running out of money. Charles I recalled Parliament in 1640 to raise taxes in support of his unpopular Catholic anti-Parliament high-tax dictatorship. He is related to all of the European monarchies, Anne of Cleves and various other branches of the people that came across to try and have male babies so the bloodline could continue, and that is where the gods get the better of them. Yeah. In 1640, to raise taxes in support of his unpopular Catholic anti-Parliament high-tax dictatorship, Cromwell opposed the higher taxes and demanded King Charles govern with Parliament's consent on religious and civil issues. Unresolved, this led to civil war between parliamentarians and royalists, with many of the royalists being heavily related and Cromwell being related to many of the parliamentarians. Do you understand why Jim bailed out? This is him that was interviewing the replaced Rothschild, and if he cannot tell the difference, then he's in Donald's team. And he's now left the social media, so he cannot be accused of that. He's from Alsace, which is in the Alpine regions for Rockefeller, Trump and all of Donald's relatives, and the Forbes rich listers that are Heinz and the Holy Roman Ottoman emperors. This made the English Civil War something of a family battle. Cromwell joined the parliamentary army with no previous experience and became an English military leader. He was the first to recruit officers based on merit as opposed to noble birth. The English Civil War was not a war of two sides, one against the other. It was more complicated and complex than that. In some places, one side went with Parliament and the other with the king. In other places like Scotland, religion and local economies came into the matter, and civil war raged alongside religious strife and old land disputes. The king's armies were led by the aristocracy, who had the initial advantage of arms, armour and money. The first battles were armed brawls that parliamentary forces mainly lost. There were near defeats at Edge Hill, 23rd October 1642, and Marston Moor, 2nd July 1644, and nightmare retreats from Lostwithiel in Cornwall, 2nd September 1644. The Royal Cavalry could not stay on the battlefield after charging, and this saved Parliament early on. Cromwell was also a descendant, wait for this is the type of news that I've just released to Fetzer, was also a descendant of three royal bloodlines: England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire. That's Hohenlohes versus Stauffenberg. And popes versus Kaiser. 20th October 1708, Prince Consort George of Denmark died of syphilis. 8th June 1714, Electress Sophia, George Ludwig's mother, died 53 days before the British throne became available. 1st of August 1714, Queen Anne died of syphilis and porphyria, arsenic poisoning by Rothschild, which is why Greg wants to have this book published, and why Rothschilds have rang Jim Fetzer to tell him to stop the conversation, because it's going to get explicit about who sires the babies, who delivers the pox, who delivers the arsenic, Yeah, and who are the witches that give them everything that make them sexually impotent? Yeah, August 1714, George Ludwig became King George I of Britain and moved there with his mistresses, the scarecrow Maypole and another short, fat and wide, and their 3 illegitimate children, none of whom had any inheritance rights. 23rd November 1726, Princess Sophia, 60, ex-wife and mother of King George I's children, was killed off. Yeah, lovely living under the regime that is Rothschild. 11th June 1727, King George I died. George Ludwig did this while assuring all and sundry that he had no interest in the British crown. He's already the British king. I do not understand that. The Freemasons' German Protestant mafia helped organise the con of the British throne and did much of the thinking behind it. They followed King George I all over the English Channel and 3 years later officially formed in Great Britain inside the banks all over the country. And they're still there, and that is still the unpoliced mafia that is Fred Goodwin and all of those other magnates that are on the take right since the Norse conquest from above and below. Yeah, Normandy and Norway. Part of their articles were dedicated to the destruction of monarchies, with Britain's to be the last, for which they required medical doctors, each elevating the other in a process called twins. This resulted in the most evil and corrupt doctors, lawyers, and politicians. Yeah, let's listen for the doctors that are chatting downstairs. Yeah, this is the place where Basil Switzer drinks and communicates with the ordinary punters. Part of their articles were dedicated to the destruction of monarchies, with Britain's to be the last, for which they required medical doctors, each elevating the other in a process called twins. This resulted in the most evil and corrupt doctors, lawyers and politicians, as well as scribes, courtiers and historians, achieving the highest positions, and it was those elevated doctors' roles to kill the monarchs whenever it was required. And there is the orange terror symbol. So, there is Simon Fraser and the launch of the prima nocte shagging of little girls under the age of 12 so that they can become spies when they start to ovulate all over Europe. How Scotland lost its parliament, the Scottish Cons. Simon Fraser, Lord Lovat, 1667 to 9th April 1747, was abundantly charismatic to both soldiers and women, and was beguilingly ugly. He was a Scottish Jacobite and chief of the clan Fraser, famous for his violent feuding, and was thus noted by international spies who wished to manipulate the outcome of Scottish everything. Simon the Fox Fraser was chief of Clan Fraser, but was third in line. Yeah, this is 1 of 5 pages in that massive chapter. Yeah. Simon the Fox Fraser was chief of Clan Fraser, but was third in line to inherit the style Lord Lovat. Yeah, that's the Illuminati families again, and the people that live just up the road, yeah, right next to Flodden. During his life, he was obsessed with one thing, gaining the title of Lord Lovat and his clan lands. This drove him to be the most unprincipled man of Scotland. Thus his history is the Scottish history. As a chief, he could inspire patriotism with a few small words. There is nothing I place in balance with my kindred. He had good command of Scottish, English, French and Latin, and could quote appropriate passages from classics on the coin. With his my way temperament, he was a target for all foreign spies who had an eye to breed him with their chambermaids. The offspring would then direct the histories of their own countries. History notes Simon Fraser as a born traitor and deceiver, and one of his illegitimate children as one of the most famous men of France. As soon as Simon Fraser of King's College in Aberdeen left King's College in Aberdeen, he raised an army of 300 men. That's Piso Bible code for Christ. No, the cross. From his clan, and formed a regiment in the service of William and Mary, Queen Mary II, and King William III. He's got the facial structure of those Orangemen, waving their hankies around on the high street, trying to tell me that I'm going to die soon with the plague. Yeah, and my body will be dumped in the boot of their car. It was lovely, inspiring lesson. As soon as Simon Fraser left King's College, an army of 300 men from his clan, and formed a regiment in the service of William and Mary, so that the regiment could fight against them in the service of the deposed King James II at a moment's notice. His ancestor was Hugh Fraser, 7th Lord Lovat, 1599 to 16 February 1646. His son died, His son died young, and the title passed to his grandson, Hugh Fraser, 8th Lord Lovat, who passed it to his firstborn son, Hugh Fraser, 9th Lord Lovat, 28th September 1666, 14th September 1696, who passed it on to his cousin, Thomas Fraser of Beaufort, 10th Lord Lovat, 1636 to May 1699, and after much wrangling, this was passed on to his second, Simon Fraser, 11th Lord Lovat. This is how Scotland lost its parliament, the Scottish Corns and the treasonous people. The fact that it worked again and again engendered a huge superiority complex amongst the French, who then developed a huge derision of the Scottish. We've already got one. This quality blinded the French in the early stages of the English-inspired revolution in France. One of Tavistock's early claims to fame. You get it? That is the massacre in 1678 of all of those people under the guard of the Swiss Guard from the Illuminati families that are the Templars. And one of Tavistock's early claims to fame. This in turn paved the way for the rise of John Bone, who was from the Scottish clan known as Bonaparte, the Bone Party, whose issue became General Bonaparte. Successive patriotic 12 and 13-year-old chambermaids were brought into Simon Fraser's lodgings, and as each got pregnant, they would be replaced with another. This went on for 10 years, and Simon Fraser, 37 to 47 years old,